We've seen all the problems we could possibly encounter if we tried changing values of an object copied by a reference. So, how can we properly copy it and remove a reference? How can we create a complete clone of an object or an array? Let's first start with cloning arrays. There are a few ways on how we can properly clone an array. The first way is to use something known as a spread operator. Spread operator is a newer addition to JavaScript. Imagine you had an array. Const numbers is going to be equal to an array. In there, we can have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's our array. So how could we use the spread operator on this array? Spread syntax allows you to spread the values of strings, objects, and arrays. How does it work? Let's see it in action on our numbers array. The syntax of a spread operator is represented just by 3 dots. To test it, we can write a console log where we're going to use the spread operator by writing 3 dots, dot, 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 and now we can use the numbers array. Take a look. In here, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, all as separate numbers, not inside of an array. That means that we get back all the values from the array individually, one after the other. They got taken out from the array. So how can we use this? Take a look at this code. I'm going to do a new array called new numbers, and then in there, I'm going to create a completely new array where I'm going to spread the properties of numbers, dot, 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 numbers. Now, if I remove this console log, and if I just console log the new numbers, let's see what we're going to get. As you can see, we got an array back with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Looks exactly the same as the original numbers array. But what happened here? We get an array that looks identical to the one that we had at the beginning. But is it completely identical? Let's check the equality. We're going to create another copy and then compare them. So, const copied numbers, and then that's going to be equal to numbers. Remember, that's how we previously did it. We just referenced to the old array. So, first of all, let's check the equality of numbers to copied numbers. If you watched the previous video, then you might assume that this is going to be true, because these two arrays point to the same location in the memory. For example, 1 to 3, ASD. They are completely the same, they represent the same array. We knew that, but now if we do another console log, in there we're going to try to do the comparison of numbers and new numbers. Just like that. If you now save that, let's see the console log. As you can see, we get back false. So for the first comparison, we got back true, and for the second one, false. What does this mean? This means that copied numbers array is pointing to the same place in memory where the original numbers array is pointing to. Therefore, if we change one or the other, they would both change, and we do not want that. On the other hand, numbers and new numbers are not the same. They represent a completely different array. Let's try changing the original array. Numbers.push, and let's push in the value of 6. Now, we're not going to console log these things. We're going to have 3 separate console logs. First, we're going to console log the original array. Then, we're going to console log the copied numbers. And finally, we're going to console log the new numbers. If we save this, take a look. We have 3 arrays back. Numbers and copied numbers both changed, which is not good. But then new numbers remained completely the same, unchanged, because that's how it should be. We never pushed something to new numbers, right? That means that the newly created array, the array created using the spread operator, was unchanged. This means that we created something called a shallow clone. The shallow part is going to make more sense once we introduce the deep clones. But this is it. You successfully created a shallow clone of the numbers array. This time, if I just mock this, it has a different reference to the memory. The second method to make a shallow clone is going to be array slice. We already talked about that array method. If you remember what it does, it basically just copies the entire array and allows you to take certain parts of it and put it in a new variable. If you just call slice without any parameters, it's going to take the whole array. So what we can do in here, we can say numbers dot slice, and this is going to be our new numbers. Now we're still doing the same thing, pushing here and console logging all three things, and let's take a look. If we save it, we get the same output, which means that using the array slice, we also got a completely changed array that points to a different location in the memory, while these two remain the same. And now we're going to move to the part where we try cloning objects. There are also two good ways of how you can make a shallow clone of an object. And the first way is again using a spread operator. I'm gonna remove this, and in this case, let's create a person object. That object is going to have a name of, let's do John, and also it's going to have age of, let's say 20. Great. To create the other person, we're going to declare a variable, other person, and we're going to make it equal to a new object, new empty object. Inside of that object, we're going to spread all the properties of a person object. This means that it's basically going to take everything that's inside, not including the actual location in the memory of the object, and it's simply going to put the values right here. Now, let's try changing the age of the original person. So that's going to be person.age is equal to, for example, 22. Now, if we console log both the person and the other person, you can see that our first object aged to 22, while the second one remained untagged, and that's exactly how it should be. The second way of how we can make a shallow clone of an object is using object.assign. In here, we can keep working on the same example. We have our original person, and to create the second person, we're gonna use the object.assign, and that takes two properties. First property that it takes is where it's going to store certain values. So it's going to be a new empty object. And what values is it going to store? Well, all the values from the person object. It's basically going to add the properties from the person object to this new object. The premise behind these two ways, both using the spread operator and object assign, are completely the same. Create a new object, new location in the memory, take all the properties, and then finally create that new object. Now, if we save this, you can see the situation is the same. In my personal opinion, the spread syntax looks just a bit cleaner both for objects and the arrays. And this is the way you're gonna see it in the wild once you start creating real projects on your developer job. Awesome, we just learned two different ways for cloning both objects and arrays. As I mentioned, the two ways of cloning we just explored create shallow clones. In the next video, we're going to learn what is the difference between shallow and deep clones and how we can create a deep clone.